Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have another review for you from the brand Seiko. Now this particular model actually caused quite an uproar when I first started kind of posting it on Instagram as well as in the community links of the channel. So I actually ended up doing a whole long ramble kind of about this watch and kind of it being what so many people had asked for, but people kind of still being very upset about the whole thing. So I actually switched it up a little bit. I took it off the bracelet, which I'll still bring in for the full, obviously this is the full review, but we'll touch on that. But I think where this watch really belongs is on a leather strap. I think the case shape really enables it to be quite a star as a strap monster, even more so than I would say than the beloved SARB035. So with that said, of course, a little bit about Seiko. They were founded back in 1881. They are Japanese in origin and now have factories throughout Asia. They cover all market segments from the most entry level to the highest of the high end. Now, about this type of watch, I'd consider this an everyday watch, although it could also be quite a dedicated dress watch. But as far as key common characteristics and design language, when you're looking for something to wear every day, you're of course going to want a very versatile blend between sporty and dressy attributes. This particular model is the Presage SRPD97, or depending on where you are, it could also be the SARY147. And this essentially is the Japanese garden dial. So it does have that sandy texture that, that's basically inspired by the Japanese Zen garden. Now, the retail price on this is going to be 60,500 Japanese yen, which is the list price, but dealers are going to get it to you for around 450 to 550. I actually purchased this through Bezel House, so I will leave a link to them in the description so you can check it out from that standpoint. Hopefully they have more in stock because this thing is a real screaming deal if you ask me. Now, the case size is a 38.2 millimeter diameter. It has an 11.3. Oh, you know what? I'm just jumping right into the specs. Let's get this thing in hand. Okay, now in hand, you can see quite a looker there. I'll try to get close enough to where you guys can see the texture on that beautiful Zen-like dial. Just gorgeous. You can see the light playing a bit on that blued seconds hand. Not thermally blued, but it does have a little treatment on there that does give it a nice bright blue appearance. Quite handsome. And I think does add just right bit of color splash to this beautifully white and stark dial. Now, like I was mentioning before, 38.2 millimeter diameter, 11.3 millimeter thickness with a 43.4 millimeter lug to lug, fully polished stainless steel case, and then you do have a slight dome on this sapphire crystal. Now the movement in here is your Seiko 4R35, which you're seeing across many watches, especially in the Seiko Presage line. Basically, they're separated by two movements, now adding 3 to 6R basically versus the 4R. These are going to be the more affordable ones versus the 6R, which are going to be the more premium higher end models. So this does have a see-through display back, so you can see the movement there. Really nice. You also do have a nicely signed crown. And then, of course, this particular strap that I have it on is from B&R Bands, who I am a huge supporter of personally because I buy their stuff all the time. And you can see this is a Horween chromesicle leather model in 20 millimeters with a beautiful texture grain there, and then I do have my trusty Grand Seiko 16 millimeter buckle there, fully milled, beautifully done, which I think the actual the finishing actually goes perfect with this piece because it does have that beautiful kind of sandy grainy texture as well. Now, before we get into the drama, guys, let's address something here, right? Stuff like this has been coming out for a while, and people are like, Seiko, make it smaller. Like, a lot smaller. 40, 41 millimeters for a watch like this just feels too big. And this is a beautiful piece, man. Look at that texture on that dial. That's one thing that Seiko just does immaculately. Look at all the fine little textures and the way they catch the light. Gorgeous snowflake like dial, the winter scene dial, from this limited model. Now, the scale though makes this more of you know, more of an everyday watch versus a dedicated dresser. This one feels more like a dedicated dress watch, guys, at the 38 millimeter, and it draws a lot of comparisons to this old favorite here, the SARB035, except the cream dial. This is more of a pure white dial, almost a little bit silvery, right? Which I think makes it more versatile, of course, because not everything is going to have a cream tint to it, but white is definitely something that's kind of be quite universal as something that is going to flow well and complement well. Cream isn't always going to complement every combination well, but you know, maybe you don't really care too much about that. Also, I did switch this out with a bracelet from Alpha. It's nothing special, guys. I just like the way that it fits, one, and also mainly the scale. I like that it's smaller. Pretty much all the other Jubilee options out there that are solid are much thicker, and I feel oversized for this watch case. Now, I have nothing against the SARB035. I own one. It's a great watch. I even own a variant of it that's even nicer, with gold accents and a really cool kind of beads of rice bracelet. Which, check the channel for that. I probably should have prepped it to be ready for this review as well. But needless to say, this is comparable. People have been wanting a new SARB, guys. And honestly, if they release this, let's just think about this. If they re-release this now, like they did with the SARB017, the Alpinist, it would be a much more expensive watch, right? But this is not known for being an expensive watch. It's known for being a watch that's cheaper. And what they've done, of course, is they've released a watch that is on the cheaper, more attainable side. This is an attainable watch, guys. This is something you can get. You know, $450 to $550 from dealers is not bad for a completely in-house watch with a unique dial like this, a very on-brand aesthetic that's unique. This isn't something that's not an homage. If anything, it can be an homage to other Seikos, right? But it's not something you're ever gonna have to look over your shoulder about, right? You don't. No one's ever gonna be like, oh, that's a fake this or that. That's a wannabe Rolex. That's a wannabe Omega. This is clearly a Seiko of the Seikoist levels, which I find to be a quite pleasing look. And when you put it next to something like this, also great, but everybody was like, let's make it smaller. And look what it's powered by, guys. Oh, a 4R movement. Also, this has a mineral crystal. This has a sapphire. Also, it has a solid bracelet, which the other one actually, I want to say, didn't have a solid bracelet. It had hollow end links here, fully milled solid links. The only thing that is not solid is the folding in you know, in the clasp, which isn't great, but honestly, at least it's thin and makes it very, very comfortable. This is actually quite a comfortable bracelet to wear, and also due to the size, because you do get some half links on there, this is actually very easy to size and get a great fit on. Versus the bracelet for the SARB, which for me, I could never make fit me right. It's because for what it offered and the adjustability, I could never get it dialed in until I put it on something like this with a fair amount of adjustability. So, although it was nice enough finish-wise, there was just some things about that bracelet I just couldn't get on board with. This one was great on bracelet, but on the strap, I just think it's something really special. And of course, I love to showcase that gorgeous buckle there. Now, as far as some of the details in this dial, guys, which we'll just take a close look at here. Okay, some of the details when it comes to that gorgeous looker of a dial there. You do have the applied indices, and they have this great two-tone texture. You got a high polished accent right there on the outer portions, and then the center lines are actually matching this kind of granular texture that you see across the dial, which I think is really cool. And it still actually pops, which is a really nice, just because of the way the light plays. You do get a little bit of contrast in certain places, which is nice. Now the water resistance on this one isn't anything to write home about. It's only 30 meters or 100 feet, which is, you know, more than adequate for something like this that is clearly not meant to be a sports watch or a watch that is meant to be, you know, out, you know, washing dishes with or something like that, right? So they could do things to make it more water resistant, but you know, it could also make it bigger, thicker, bulkier, and also more expensive. So I'm fine with it being just 30 meters of water resistance. Now you have 20 millimeter lugs, and of course we already talked about the bracelet, you know, the 5-link, it does taper and whatnot. But here, I just love this really, really traditional 20 millimeter down to a 16. And then you do have this beautifully milled Grand Seiko clasp, which of course is purchased separately, guys. If I have to spell it out for you, where did I get it? I got it on eBay. Just Google Grand Seiko 16 millimeter clasp. You'll find it. If you're willing to pay for it, you are. If you're not, don't come complaining to me. It wasn't cheap. All right. With all that said, let's actually get this thing on wrist and just see the impression that it makes. Okay, as you guys can see on my 7 1/4 inch wrist, this thing wears like an absolute dream. Look at it up close, even with the lens distortion that normally makes watches look quite oversized. Those shorter lugs really give you an idea to see how well that just centers on the wrist. And then of course, you can see here a much better, more proportional look that it wears really, really well. You can see on the wrist. Wraps really nicely, fully polished case, so nothing special, you know, hype transitions or anything like that. But this thing is just a nice shape. It wears well, it performs well, it's very comfortable, more comfortable than the SARB in my opinion. You know, maybe it has to do with the bracelet being just a little bit lighter and more flexible and pliable, as you can see here. There is some play to it, but not like a tinny feel. You can hear that. This isn't like super tinny, right? It's more solid. This is tinny, right? And it didn't come with the SARB or anything like that, but there's a difference between something that's comfortable because of like it's just super tinny and light versus something that's comfortable because it's, you know, I think it's pretty well designed. Still solidly engineered, right? So, yeah, maybe you'll take my word for it, maybe you won't, but this thing works, guys. It really, really, really does. So, you know, really light and balanced. As far as model variants go, they do have a black dial option also available. Comparable models, of course, you're gonna have the discontinued SARB035, you know, and all, you know, other currently available watches that are trying to fill that same space, which I feel like there are a lot of models out there that are trying to be that kind of 38 millimeter everyday watch. This one is going to be a 38 millimeter everyday watch that it just shouts Seiko and everything there is to be loved about the brand. It just is a Seiko looking Seiko, guys. It's like it's just, it's what it is. It doesn't look like it. This thing exudes Seiko. So if you like Seiko, you're gonna like this. If you wanted something that you could wear in a very casual way that isn't something super high end or, you know, something limited where you don't have to worry about like destroying it, you got something here that can be worn every day, guys. Let's actually go ahead and move into some low light transition shots because there is no lume on this bad boy, but I think low light will still be pretty telling in some of the way that the way the dial plays with the light and whatnot, and then also a little bit, I guess, on the finishing. All right, guys, let's go ahead get ready to hit the lights. All right, let's go ahead and get some low light transition going because there is no loom. So what I like to do with the low light transition essentially is take a look. I do have the bracelet back in there so you guys can take a look at the finishing. Now, what the studio lights will do often is wash out a lot of the imperfections in the finish. They'll also make the dials render in certain ways that you won't necessarily always get because you're not always going to be out in direct sunlight or, of course, in a super well lit area. So these low light transition shots are going to give you a better idea of what these are going to render like in more realistic lighting when you're coming in and out of a building, in and out of a vehicle and whatnot, or just in general, you know, unwell lit places where you're going to get a little bit dim, whatnot, maybe some cloud coverage going on. So, but one thing that it also does show is that finishing on the bracelet. So there's a lot of talk about, oh, it's a cheap bracelet, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, it's not a 3-link oyster style bracelet, right? So it's not meant to be super sporty. Again, this isn't the level of, I guess, everyday watch that the SARB was supposed to be, right? With 100 meters water resistance and a much more overbuilt, I'd say, style bracelet. This is definitely meant to be more dressy and more kind of, I guess, just a little bit more slick, right? And not necessarily overly robust. And you can see also the way the light plays on that dial with the graininess there. Quite beautiful, guys. So we'll go ahead and get the lights back on and get into some closing thoughts. You know, this thing has the makings of an absolute strap monster. Super versatile. You know, you got that classic look and proportions, guys. There's not a lot to dislike about this watch besides the fact that Seiko didn't just relaunch the SARB and make it cheaper somehow, right? Just making something that costed... You just can't do that, right? There was a time when Rolex Submariners still had pretty much the same specs and costed a lot less, right? Same goes for everything. There was a time when everything was cheaper. And of course, something like a Japanese domestic market only model that was meant to be a real treat, you have to price that based off of what it's for the market. This is a global model though, and Seiko's become a global brand, so they do have to think about, they can't just make this watch $250 to make some people happy. Then it's like, what about the watches that are supposed to be cheaper than this? We're supposed to just give those away. I'd say with their Presage line, Seiko's really made it very, very clear that they're no longer trying to be the best and finest cheap watch. There's tons of micro brands for that, guys, and they do great jobs. I review them on my channels. I freaking love micro brands, but that doesn't somehow devalue what this is, right? Just like because there are brands out there that offer so much, it doesn't just all of a sudden mean like a Rolex is worthless because it doesn't have a date complication, doesn't have AR coding, you know, and it's just essentially a basic 3-hander. With nothing special to it, right? Even in steel, even in 904, which isn't even like the greatest steel, it's just more corrosive resistant. It's like, that's not even like harder, or there's like not a specialty from that standpoint. It's literally used because it's better corrosion resistance. So yes, there are things that are objectively better. There are things that are, you know, that just offer you more for your money for objective purposes, right? But owning a timepiece and just something that's within your style isn't always objective. There's a lot of subjective attributes, and one of the things that are quite subjective are the values of a luxury watch, right? And some of those values are things like in-house movements, things like heritage, things like horological significance, right? That's the thing that Seiko has, right? It has it above other brands. And yes, it's more expensive to create something new from nothing, and to have machines to pay for them and own them and maintain them, right? And have operators and craftsmen and all these things, right? Versus somebody who's just ordering from a factory that has to have all that overhead, right? If it was cheaper for you to own everything and mill it all yourself and do it all yourself, pretty sure everybody would be doing it, right? But it's not. It's much cheaper to let somebody else take on that burden, and then you can just buy it for this much and mark it up this much, and you mark it up enough to where you're giving yourself a salary. That's a very easy business model in comparison to something where tier Seiko, you do have to price against your other lines, your everything else, right? So there's a hierarchy there, that a red tape that other brands don't have to deal with. There's also people they have to pay. There's machines they have to pay for. There's a lot of overhead involved, right? Could Seiko make super cheap watches? Yeah. Is it cheaper probably for Seiko to make watches than it's been? Yeah, it's technology marches on. But no brand is just pigeonholed to, I mean, come on, guys. What could you pay for a freaking fully spec'd out Dodge Viper, a Corvette one, years ago? The price, everything's getting more expensive, all right? We can't just keep set on this idea that everything is just like a $400 watch is going to be the same watch every year, right? For 20, 30, 40, 50 years. The landscape of what you can get for $1,000 is so vastly different than it used to be. There's a lot of bang per buck, right? There's just a lot out there. But instead of making the finest cheap watch, Seiko is actually making the most attainable and affordable luxury watch, because this thing is in-house. It has provenance. It has heritage. They've got horological significance out the yin yang. I mean, this brand is the brand that made the Swatch Group relevant by killing so many Swiss brands during the quartz crisis, right? All these brands that people will just openly pay more money for, Omega, Longines, Tissot. People, well, for Tissot you can get blah, this and that. All right, guys. Tissot got put out of business by Seiko, and then they were bought by the Swatch Group and all stuffed with ETA movements. They're not bad watches, guys, but there's a much different level of heritage when you're comparing a brand that was saved by another brand, a conglomerate that businessmen came in to save and revive, essentially, and keep on life support, right? Like Hamilton, are they an American watch company? They're not. They're a Swiss watch company. The provenance and all of the the glamour of American watchmaking in Hamilton is gone, right? It's just the name. Seiko is still Seiko. They've been Seiko. All right, the Seiko Epson Corporation is built on the backs of Seiko Time Corporation. So anyways, guys, this has been a long one. That's what she said. Let me know what you think in the comments below. You like the video, hit like. You hate it, give me a thumbs down too while you're at it. Rant on in the comments. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me how I just need to stop being a fanboy, even though literally every other video on my channel is loving micro brand watches and how much value they offer and how much I highly recommend them. But you know what? I just can't ignore Seiko models like this. There are ones that I ignore, believe me. I don't have them. I don't, I'm not bringing in a Sumo, a Samurai. There's a lot of watches that from Seiko that you're not going to see me review because I don't have the interest in them. But something like this is literally what people have been crying out for. A handsome, dressy Seiko at the right scale, at 38 millimeters, guys. And one of these cool textured dials that people pay tons of money for, right? And it happens to also come on a bracelet that is technically a solid bracelet with solid end links. It has pin connectors, sure, but you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. At least they're pin and collar. They're not friction pins. This thing rocks. I like it. I enjoy it. It's not the best watch that I own. It's not the best Seiko that I own, but it is in a sweet spot for me. And I think what you get for the money is quite good because it is Seiko. So if another brand did it, who knows what I'd say. But Seiko doing this to me is pretty good. And I'm happy that they're doing it. And I'm hoping it's well received so they will continue to do it and maybe explore even making some more higher end options, maybe some 6L powered options that aren't $2,000-$3,000. I do have a 6L powered watch that I love, the SJE. 073. Check for the review on that if you're interested. Thin movement, akin to the Soprod A10 and ETA 2892. Guys, this ramble has gone long enough. So, you know what? Talk to you in the comments. Thanks.